Good day, fellow investors. Petrobras, highly requested and not doing great lately. If you look at the stock from a long term, there have been some booms, oil, some ups, some downs, and now we are, say, in the mid part from that stock perspective and a little bit weaker also over the past 5 years and in the late period. But the key here is this: dividend yield 22%, P ratio of 6, market cap 80 billion. Let's look at the Petrobras strategic plan that was just released and see where we are going. And immediately let me start with this. This is something much different than you see on Wall Street, and that's why also I like to look elsewhere for information. So peak capacity, peak production, peak oil in the next few years, and you can see how they fairly say how demand is going to decline significantly going forward. And we have already seen a small decline there from demand from China. And if it isn't like this, if it is like this, then it can be very ugly for oil producers already. But okay, for now, everything looks good. Oil demand stable still for, let's say, 7 to 8 years. And this is where we can analyze the supply and demand and also the impact on companies. Now, when it comes to Petrobras, they want to grow, of course, like every other company out there, they want to grow. And that is also something that leads me to believe that supply will continue to grow as everyone is growing in the sector. But Petrobras is also paying huge dividends, and that is something you can, let's say, get paid while you wait. And if we look at their projections on lower oil prices, you can see them expecting lower oil prices going forward. There is the 45 to 55 in dividends billion projected, potential other billions there. There are a lot of lease payments and a lot of capex required to keep that production up. They will invest huge amounts of money. That is the oil business. You simply need to invest a lot to be able to produce. And you can see here how much they are going to invest. Almost $20 billion a year of investments, which leads also to a lot of debt. They have been investing a lot in the 2010 period when oil prices were high. Then it took for them to recover that, but their projected debt is to be around $65 billion going forward. So they're not planning to really lower their debt going forward, but when it comes to oil scenarios, they say that a break-even portfolio, they just need oil at 28, which is far from the current level, and they still will make money on prices above that. I think if oil is at 45, that's their break-even also with the investments and with everything, and they should keep on producing. You see here the growth going forward, and then they have replacement challenges from 2030 onward, but that is pretty much the case with everything. However, this is a long period for oil, technological improvements and things like that. If there is demand, I'm sure there will be supply. When it comes to replacing reserves, Petrobras did really well compared to peers that have to also do acquisitions to replace those reserves, and that is why they are investing more in exploration and production, especially in their salt areas in the ocean where they are specialists, and they are now making acquisitions and going across the ocean to Africa to apply their know-how there. In general, they plan to grow production like every other company, also invest heavily in downstream projects, nothing wrong with that, integration, and also due to requirements from Brazilian government, invest a lot of money, 16 billion, into renewables. I hope that will get a return there, but that's not their focus. However, it looks better on a financial presentation. So in general, high investments, but also high expected dividend yields, and at the end, oil depends on oil prices, of course. If we look at the current situation with oil prices and where we are, look a little bit at the last results, they are, again, proposing strong dividends, strong operating cash flows, strong free cash flows, and the gross debt in line with projections. The Brent price is going down a little bit, diesel crack spread also for the refineries going down a little bit, but if you look at the cash flows, there is a lot of required for investments, leasings. I think that should be included in operating cash flows because that's how it goes. And there is 2.3 billion left for dividends and 1 billion left for, let's say, debt repayments. All else equal, there is the dividend. I looked a little bit deeper in the dividend in how would that look like over 4 quarters. And there is a 14% dividend yield going forward. And we'll discuss that more in the projections in the valuation part. I also looked a little bit at all the last Q&A conference call, and the analysts were mostly focused on operational things going forward. But there was this one question, what Petrobras has planned to a potentially more aggressive oil scenario. And they use 45 a barrel to calculation. And in that case, net present value needs to be greater than 0. Now, of course, it's much higher because oil prices are higher, so everything looks good for Petrobras. But this is also the key risk, 45 a barrel. So the resiliency scenario for Petrobras is 45. Lower than that, and then it is trouble. And here also a good question, when it comes to all these investments, when you look at prices of investing, of building, those went up significantly in the last few years, and therefore everything goes up, and the capex might be even higher than expected. So that's also something to calculate things. But let's go to valuation. I've looked a little bit at the financials. Of course, it is all related to oil prices, the net income. There is a lot of bad investments in the past as they are selling their assets at a loss, unfortunately. There are other operating activities. They somehow add a lot of cash flows here. So that's something I had to look into, because when it comes to these cash flows compared to net income, that includes leases, and that is then a little bit misleading, because cash from operations, okay, you say, look at this, you remove the capex and then you are at 25 billion. Why isn't there a 25 billion dividend? Well, it is 16 and minus the other 10 that go for other things. Higher investments projected going forward, likely to be longer there to replace the production. And you can see here going from low investments to 20 billion, which means the dividend has to go lower. We cannot see a 36 billion dividend except for oil price increases. I've looked a little bit deeper into what they are using their cash flows and how they are managing that. To sum things up, 14, maybe 16 billion could be paid in dividends. They are a little bit more careful on that. That would, yes, be a 20% dividend yield, and that is in line with the past dividends there. But then again, I have also looked a little bit over the quarter, and there are some good quarters, there are some weak quarters, like the last Q4. So maybe this will also be a weaker quarter. Perhaps the easiest way to look at the company is to just take their estimations at current oil price levels, 45 to 55 billion in dividends through 2029. That's 5 years. So that is 13% dividend yield going forward. 13% is not bad. They are pushing up their investments that will weigh on the dividend, but still not bad. Few now have a 13% yielder in their portfolio going forward, and that expected yield to be there for the next 5 years. But as always, there are also risks, and the risks start with oil prices. If they break even at 45, if oil goes to 60 and stays at 60 for 2 years, you have to halve the 13% dividend yield and maybe go to 4 or 5%. Then Petrobras at the 4% dividend yield, doesn't look as good, the stock crashes 50%. That is the key risk when it comes to oil prices. If oil prices go to 45, no dividend yield, debt covenants, suddenly everyone panics about the debt, fire asset sales, less investments, less everything, it looks even uglier, 75% down. That is a risk that we have to keep in mind. On the other side, yes, if oil prices go to 120 and stay there 150, Petrobras, that doesn't have all those Middle East situations going on for them, so they can pump that oil and sell it globally at higher prices, makes a lot of money. The government will say, okay, you need to sell that oil in Brazil at lower prices, but they would still make a lot of money, and I would not be surprised with a 30-40 billion dividend, which is 50% of the current market capitalization. That's the reward side, of course. Then there is investing renewables, Brazil politics, management that has changed now, looks something interesting, but they are still investing. And the key risk, apart from oil prices, is debt, and debt. Because as I said, when that oil prices goes down, like we'll see a little bit later, then it becomes a huge issue. Therefore, when it comes to our quadrant, I have put Petrobras here and perhaps maybe the risk somewhere here, but okay, I have put it a little bit riskier than the market. Maybe I should have gone here. It's a little bit hard to compare to everything, but we'll update over time. The return there is 13%, a little bit higher risk, and therefore, if you put it at this perspective, it is a good buy from a risk and reward perspective. And we don't know what will oil prices be. These were 2023 projections, 85, 90, 100. That didn't happen, and we have now 75. And now the projections are for oil to be closer to 50 going forward, and that would be destructive for Petrobras. What's my situation? 13%, I cannot say I'm not attracted to the dividend yield, but when it comes to my diversified portfolio, I'm more of a risk of current situation, and I'm looking for things that have low risk. Petrobras has a high reward, but also a high risk. And value investing is about patience, and let me show you the oil patience I am focusing on personally. If you look at oil prices, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opportunities over the last 3 decades to buy with low risk. High risk, low reward, and now we are somewhere in the middle. So I'm happy to wait for the next oil downturn and then check where we are and how we are going. In the meantime, we do this video, we put it on the quadrant, we'll likely update over time, follow it, so subscribe for more and check my research platform for other interesting value investments.